Hello everyone, Dario Napoli back here again for another episode of my three favorite licks. And this time around we're going to look at a solo from one of my favorite guitarists ever, which is Frank Gambale. Was an idol of mine growing up and still is to this day one of my favorite guitarists. I think one of the most original guitarists in the history of this instrument. Very polarizing. Some people love him, some people hate him. I think he's a genius of sorts, and I've always tried my best to learn from him. He's also a great teacher. The one solo that really I would say basically changed my life is this solo of this live album, Frank Gambale Live, recorded at the Baked Potato in Los Angeles. And I remember the first time I listened to this solo. I mean, I was coming from, Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, which I still love also to this day. But just hearing just how advanced the technique and the phrasing was on a clean tone, as he does on this solo, just blew my mind, and still to this day. And after listening to it for about 30 years regularly, I finally tackled this solo and was able to transcribe it. And today I'd like to share with you my three, let's just say, favorite licks. This solo is so dense of ideas, it was really hard to pick three ideas or three licks that could be usable immediately in your playing. But of course there's a lifetime of music in this solo. So I just extracted my three favorite sort of usable phrases or licks. One little quick side note I wanted to make. Most people that follow me know that I play gypsy jazz. The technique involved in playing gypsy jazz is completely different from the technique used by Frank Gambale. I would say the opposite, essentially. In the gypsy jazz technique, the position of your hand is slightly different because you're going to be favoring downstrokes and rest strokes. Frank plays in the completely opposite way, where the palm of his hand is close to the strings because he uses a lot of upstrokes and a lot of sweeping, sweep picking. So I've always loved the idea of trying to master, I would say, both, or at least being proficient enough on both where I could express myself with both techniques, because essentially I see it as different colors. Why would you want to limit yourself in terms of the colors that you use if you're an artist? And so I think being able to be proficient at both techniques allows you to play certain passages and certain phrases that are unique and that will have their own unique color. And yes, certain passages will just be a lot simpler with Frank's technique, and certain passages of course are more useful when using a gypsy picking technique. But I would suggest, if you have the time, to try to be as proficient as you can on both. One doesn't need to exclude the other. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is obviously look at the first lick in slow motion. The two chords that this lick is played over is going to be D minor 7 or 9, and E7. So let's hear it first in slow motion. So as you can see, both of these phrases start with up strokes, as we said, the more characteristic picking motion of Frank. And essentially, as we said, the two chords are going to be D minor 9, and E7. And here it is in slow motion again. Right? So we have E, C, and G. And always remember, when you play these consecutive, and of course, like I said, they're going to be all three upstrokes, up, down when you hit the A note. Now, when you play this kind of phrase where you have adjacent notes, always remember to try not to raise your finger, but plant it and then rotate, so that it'll be easier to isolate and you won't hear the notes ringing together. You want to hear them separate. So your stance should be a little less vertical, a little bit more horizontal, and rotate. Rotate the finger as if you're lying on your back, right? And rolling. So again, it's going to be up, 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 down, and then up, 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 down. So you have this consecutive motion of up, 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 down, and then up, 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 down again. Right? And then it repeats that same concept of full step up when it goes from the D minor to the E7, but except it starts on the higher sort of corner with this A note. Right, so again, up, 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 down, up, 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 down. Right, so this happens again over D minor and then E7. Okay, this next phrase will feature Frank's famous sweep picking. It's just to be said that, you know, sweep picking again is a technique. It's so I would look at it as a color. It's something that will give you a sound, a particular sound that is really not achievable with any other technique, and a fluidity that's not achievable with any other technique. So again, it's a decision whether you want to have that color in your palette or not. There's nothing wrong with having it or not having it, but it's definitely something that will make you achieve a certain sound, and only that technique can achieve that sound. Okay, so let's look at the phrase. This time it starts out on E7 and finishes on the D minor. So it's the opposite of what we did before. And again, of course, let's hear it first in slow motion. Okay, so of course lots going on there, and I hope the slow motion is somewhat understandable, but I'll of course break it down in even slower and smaller parts. So what happens is Frank is basically using throughout the whole lick, he always comes back to this particular phrase or arpeggio. And he starts out in D. This is nothing but a major arpeggio, but with the addition of the second, and then it goes to the third. So it's not 1 3 5 1 3 5, but it's 1 2 3 5, and then it repeats. So that's sort of the underlying phrase. So it starts out here on this low D, and then there's a pull off here from the E to the D, and which then supports this arpeggio. Again, it's a D major arpeggio, this time in sweep picking backwards, right? So then the same thing happens here off of the E. But what happens is that there's this little chromatic approach to it, right? Okay, that's the first part of the phrase. So it's going from the D major, add 2, to the E major, add 2. And why is this? Because essentially the tune, which really starts out on that F sharp minor is the relative of A major. And A major, in the key of A major, you have D and E are major. So when the song hits basically that E7, Frank really thinks of it as E major, although it's an E dominant, but you can still reduce it to the triad of the E major. And E major in this chord progression is basically the 5 of what? Of A major. And that's why he uses the D major arpeggio and then approaches the E major, and that's the part of the phrase that relates to the E. Now when the tune goes to the D minor, he anticipates this with the following little sweep pattern, which he uses very much, and then attacks the same sequence in F major. Now F major, as you know, is the relative major of D minor, right? Because the tune goes to D minor, but again we're thinking of it in terms of F major, so we can use that same pattern. So we're going to introduce it with this sweep, which is again up, 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 down. That's F major, right? So again, to introduce the D minor, we have this pattern. And then right here it goes to the F major. And then from here again it does the same chromatic approach to go to G. Now again, F major and G major are the what? The 4 and the 5 of C. And D is the 2 of C. So that's why the key, I mean the chord is D minor or D minor 9, but the key becomes C major. And that's why Frank uses the F and the G major arpeggios. So once again, very slowly, we start on the E7 or E major, but the arpeggio starts on D as the key is A major. So E major. Now it goes to the D minor or C major. F major over to the G major. It finishes with this little half note bend here. Okay, so the very last lick develops over the chord progression, which starts with the F sharp minor, or F sharp minor 11, or F sharp minor 7. And the relative of that chord is what? A major. And so this little lick that I'm going to show you, or that Frank plays, you can really develop when you're on a major key. In this case, if it's the A, it would be an A major lick, or a F sharp minor lick. It's interusable, basically. And again, let's hear it for slow motion. Okay, so let's look at this little lick right here. It's very simple, really, actually. Let's look at the right hand first. We have down, then we have a pull off, and then we're going to have up, 3 upstrokes in a row, and then finishing with the downstroke. So down, pull off, up, 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 down. Right? So in this case, if it's A major or F sharp minor, we start on the B, and then we go to the A flat, and then we go to the triad, the major triad of A, with upstrokes, and we finish with the ninth of A, or the 4th of F sharp, whichever way you want to look at it. Now, so once you really understand how the mechanics work in terms of when to pick, when not to pick, and what to upstroke or downstroke, then it becomes fairly simple and automatic to play something like this, because it's, again, up, pull off, 3 ups in a row, and then down. that's the thing with Frank's technique. The beauty is that it seems many times it seems a lot more complicated than what it actually really is. Once you make the mechanics yours and make it second nature, it's a very efficient sort of technique where you don't need a lot of range of motion and the passages sort of flow all together because the evolution of the phrase is sort of quite natural, I would say, once you try this a few times. Now again, of course, if you're used to downstroking and, you know, gypsy picking as they call it, this might be a little bit complicated at first, but if you really turn the palm of your hand towards the strings and really, then it should become a lot simpler over time. So I hope you enjoyed this mini tutorial on Frank's technique and the 3 favorite licks off of the Spending Sunday with You solo. If there's any questions or comments, of course, feel free to write down below. I'm happy to answer additional questions if there are any. And of course, please, if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell so that you always get notified when I come up with new videos. And stay tuned for my next episodes of my 3 favorite licks.